Welcome to Unleash Your Inspired Voice, the podcast that focuses on developing a more conscious-minded, heart-centered approach to life and business. And now here to introduce today's special guest is the host of Unleash Your Inspired Voice, author, content strategist, and Unity Consciousness activist, Peter Clark Nelson.
Hi, my name is Peter Clark Nelson, your host for Unleash Your Inspired Voice. Our guest for today's show is Katrina Elkins. Katrina is an author, leadership mastery coach, speaker, and masculine and feminine energy expert. She is also a Kundalini specialist and the host of an exciting new podcast called Elemental Lifestyle. Through her popular programs, including Waves of Bliss, Amplify Your Light, and the upcoming Elemental Lifestyle retreats, Katrina empowers men and women to own their spiritual gifts in all parts of their lives. Having personally navigated many life challenges, from early childhood abuse to getting past the illusion that her old story would be her platform for sharing her voice, Katrina is an inspirational figure whose own journey calls others to unearth and unleash their truest self-expression. Katrina encourages her clients to be fiercely honest about their deepest desires to their business partners, lovers, significant others, friends, and the communities in which they participate and thrive in. Katrina shows the limitless potential of the soul through her own liberation and undying dedication to expanding the heart connection and fierce love for everyone. If you sit with Katrina, you sit with a compassionate goddess illuminating all that is possible in this life as a human being. Her core belief is that we are all powerful creators of our own reality, and she desires nothing more than to see a soul light up with their truth by owning their power and their own self-expression. Katrina is a reminder to all of us that one beautiful soul can light the entire world. If you're as excited as I am for the topics Katrina is going to share with us, then let's get this interview started. Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Peter Clark Nelson, and I want to welcome you to the latest episode of the Unleash Your Inspired Voice podcast. This is the show that teaches you how to scale your consciousness while scaling your business. And as you heard during the intro, our guest today is Katrina Elkins. Katrina, thank you for joining us on the show.
You are so welcome. It is so amazing to be here in this space.
It's an honor to have you on. I'm incredibly excited for this conversation. And I say it's an honor because you're one of those individuals who truly and genuinely walks their talk. And for anybody who's attended your workshops, watched your videos on social media, they know what I'm talking about. And for those who are listening to the show right now and watching this video, you're in for a real treat if you've never met Katrina or been to one of her workshops. So Katrina, nobody knows your message as well as you do. So share with us what your inspired message is all about.
Oh, Peter, my inspired message, it really boils down to like two basic things right now that I'm super fired up about. And the first thing is self-expression. That to me is one of the most potent things that we can allow. And a lot of times we don't allow it in our lives. Many years I was scared of really showing up and allowing my self-expression through my voice. And now I'm actually like jumping into the arena of singing and how it's coming through and forming in so many different ways. I am like so committed to self-expression and to allowing spaces for others to really show up and shine and express their creativity, how it shows up for them. So that is one of my first prime things that gets me fired up. My second one is really creating these deep transformations and spaces for the integration of our divine feminine and masculine energies. To me, there is nothing more sacred than allowing the fullest expression of our own potency with those energies. And it is my passion and my absolute commitment to allowing space and the sanctuary for people to really embody that and to allow this deep transformation work to unfold here on this planet, because I believe that every day we live, there is so much that we can allow in our lives. There's no looking for tomorrow. There is right now. And the way that we integrate the masculine and feminine and the way that we allow those energies in our lives really allow us to be present in this moment. So we have everything we absolutely can not even imagine. Like, it's just this whole space of a new way of living. And so those are the two things that I am so fired up and passionate about.
Oh, that's beautifully said. And as I was saying at the beginning of the show, people who have not heard of you yet and who are just maybe finding this podcast, you might be wondering, well, what does divine feminine, divine masculine energies have to do with scaling a business? And the answer is everything, because those are our balancing energies, and how we harmonize them and how we unify them and express them through our inspired message is a way for us to not only just enjoy the process of being successful, but to actually be fulfilled in all areas of our life. And by the way, for those of you who also are coming across this show for the first time, one of the things that you will find that's very unique is that we all open an opportunity for listeners to engage with the guests on an extended conversation. So when you listen to the end of this interview with Katrina, first and foremost, thank you for allowing us to have an extended conversation. And there is a bonus video that Katrina and I did on the divine feminine and divine masculine energies, where we go a lot deeper into that subject. So you're invited to join us in addition to this interview. So I want to take some of the things you were just saying about just a person's authentic expression. And I know a lot of the work you do through just hours of conversations you and I have had over the last year, which have been incredibly helpful and inspiring for me. And when you talk about like working with the women and men on owning their spiritual gifts and the way that translates into, raising the consciousness for the planet, what are some of the areas that you find are consistent with the people that are coming to your workshops that you're working with one-to-one? Where are some of the challenges that they're coming to you with? And then how is it that you're helping them unlock their inspired voice, find their message, and truly own their spiritual gifts?
This is such a great question. Whew, yes. Okay. So, some of the biggest challenges that I really see a lot of incredible souls facing, men and women, is the actual space of allowing their gifts, allowing their voice to be heard, allowing their sexuality, allowing conversations, intimacy, communication. Like, those are some of the core things that are really prevalent, I believe. And it's also this bigger, there's so many new ways of operating in business. There's so many new ways of doing this because of these new energies that are coming in. And it's you so many people are awakening to this new energy. And if you haven't been communicating honestly, if you haven't found ways to really tap into your creativity, those are the spaces that I love to work with. And I love to untap that. And it's almost like there is nothing more joyous to see this unleashed power within each of us to really come out. And I foster that in a really like gentle, nurturing way where everybody feels really safe, because that's also a thing that I worked through was safety, feeling safe and expressing ourselves.
Right.
And then also letting go of the perfection. So perfectionism is a killer for creativity. And it's also a killer in businesses because, as we work in establishing our business and working, and we have to push those limits and just let things come out the way they're supposed to. So, I make errors. I show the humanity and the way that it's okay to fail. And I really provide that space for individuals to feel that it's okay to be human. And it's okay to allow this concept of perfectionism to actually stay by the wayside and to not be present in our life. Because it really is self-abuse. So those are the things, and also not with just communication and perfectionism, but also there's a huge part of this whole shift is radical honesty. Like, how honest can you be about your desires? And so really tapping in to my clients with the private one-on-one sessions, within the workshops, the retreats, I really encourage them to be radically honest with themselves and their desires.
Yeah,
that's magic.
It is. Well, that's just it, isn't it? I mean, when we're tapping into our truest, authentic desires, then we're not stumbling over, blockages, creative blockages, such as the idea of what we think perfectionism is supposed to look like and feel like. And I think that also is where, again, the parallel paths of a spiritual conscious journey and the journey of a heart-centered, conscious-minded entrepreneur, that's where those parallel paths actually intersect and they become one singular path. Whereas in previous years, you had people going to totally different sorts of programs, right? So I'm going to go to a retreat to learn how to build a sales funnel, write a best-selling book. And then, a few months later, I'm going to a retreat to learn how to get more, inner peace and self-love. Well, they've been sort of separated, they've been separated. And as a result of that, you have people that can scale a business and be successful, but not be fully prepared on a conscious energy level. And that success is going to force people to have to get in tune with some of those unworthiness issues. And I love the idea that you're working with people on such it seems like a broad scope of subjects, but it's really a singular idea, which is about self-love. And you referenced the term sexuality. And I want to jump into that subject here for a little bit, because I know one of the things that you specialize in and something that you've been, for the last several years, you've been delving into, and that is Kundalini. And Kundalini is often misrepresented in terms of sexual energy. It is a component of sexual energy. There is a lot of that there, but it's also about the rising energy of our own essence, our own consciousness. So as it rises, it expands. And that's not easy for people to deal with. If you're not prepared for it, it's sort of like saying, I want to run a marathon. You haven't ran in a few years. You go out and buy yourself some nice, expensive running shoes, and then you go try to run a marathon right out of the gate. Truth is, you're probably going to fall flat on your face within a couple of miles. And I think that's where the spirituality component comes into play, as working with your clients. So share a little bit about Kundalini energy, the role that sexuality plays in a person's ability to balance their feminine and masculine energies.
Yes. Oh, okay. So even what you were just talking about, I really got that sense of the masculine and feminine energy. So the two separate retreats, doing all these different things. Now it's time to bring it all together. And that space of Kundalini, that is the magic. It's been a journey for me for 6 years of awakening and allowing Kundalini in my life. So there's different, ways that Kundalini can be activated. Mine has really been through dreams, conversations, different retreats, allowing that energy to fully awaken me to that higher consciousness. And to be perfectly honest, it is a path that is really confusing. It can leave you with a lot of sleeplessness. It can really disrupt so much in your life. But let me tell you, just in the past 8 weeks, I've had pretty much the full integration of the Kundalini, and it has been the most exquisite unraveling that I've ever experienced in my life, because all the things that I kind of didn't want to look at, they came up to look at. And when we are allowing this integration of the heart and the spirit, and we are pulling together this community of heart-based consciousness, this higher vibration, you cannot have separation. You have to fully allow the feminine and the masculine to be the core of your being in everything you do. It is so powerful, the magic and the potency. So I just want to give a specific example what it was like for me just yesterday. So the Kundalini starts in the core and it rises up and it awakens different parts of your body, and you allow clearings, and it's a heat that rises. And mine actually just came up through my throat yesterday and up and through my head. And it was, it's like the sun beating down on you in the hottest desert, but yet you're not. Like, it's just this heat. And it has the potency to burn away anything that no longer serves you. In the work with my clients, they're experiencing the same intense, amazing transformations. Although I really help them to integrate it more gently, and really with a lot of ease and grace, because they are leaning into that support, that web, that network.
It's amazing what you do. And thank you for sharing that experience, because I know you'd sent me a message as we were getting ready, we're kind of discussing some of the subjects that we were going to be talking about. And you had sent me a message yesterday about that latest Kundalini experience. It was rising up from your throat chakra through the third eye into the crown. And I'm really glad you talked about the heat and the clearing, because my understanding of the Kundalini energies is that there isn't necessarily one specific thing that can activate it. There's a lot of misrepresentation and misunderstanding out in the general public about Kundalini energy, and it's usually it's usually kind of positioned in more of a romantic sexual context, and that is definitely a way that it gets activated. But it can come on at any given moment whenever your system is ready to clear and ready to rise and expand. So what's really critical about this, I want to say this to everybody listening, is that Kundalini rising is not necessarily something that's recommended to experience just on your own, because it's a tsunami wave of energy. And I use the word tsunami wave very specifically because it will literally take anything and everything that you have had buried, or you may have been doing some shadow work, and it will start pulling that shit up to the surface. So as it's rising through your chakras, from, as Katrina said, from the base all the way up to the crown, it sometimes will stop at certain areas because that's where it's bottled up, and it'll clear that. So understanding Kundalini energy is also understanding the psychological metaphors and componentry of your chakras. So I do invite people to go and do some searches on that if you haven't already delved into it. So having said that, I want to kind of look back again at just the way that you are incorporating not only Kundalini, but I know you work with individuals, and a lot of your videos are on leadership mastery. There's a way of expressing your authentic self. So what happens, and it just, in all of your years of experience of working with this, what happens when the Kundalini energy is rising and it forces you to have to look at things about your unworthiness, where you literally start to question your own sense of sanity, your own sense of authenticity. And for some people who are already in the midst of doing, let's say, for example, public speaking, or they're already out there in the public eye, they could find themselves in a momentary place of real self-doubt. And we're talking about people who are generally fairly confident. So when it comes to the leadership aspect, and it comes to balancing the flow of these heightened, elevated energies, what are some ways that people can kind of prepare themselves for it and move through that?
I am so glad you asked this question. It is so important. This space of allowing these energies, this strength, and when we're actually operating from a public, the leaders who are working and so obvious in their communities, and they're stepping forward, and then they're also really showing up and allowing these gifts to come through. It can be a space of huge vulnerability, and it's a way to allow this vulnerability to really show up, and that's the place of strength. Many of you have already heard that, like, your actual strength is in your vulnerability. And I wanted to touch on that for just a moment, because when we allow this growth, it's a matter of trusting ourselves so deeply that we then allow all the things that we need for self-love. So it's included, like, meditation is super powerful way to ground. Being on Mother Earth, if there's those overwhelming moments of how do I allow this spiritual expansion, yet I still need to show up and be a leader in my community? Or waking up at 3 a.m. going, I'm in my head again, great, all these different things. I mean, I've walked it, I've seen it with so many different leaders that I'm coaching right now, where there's that little bubble of disruption that shows up. And it's a bubble, and you need to contend with it. And the way that you do is by bringing awareness to it, meditating, breathing, and then really leaning into support that allows the vulnerability to even open up more in a way that provides more of your strength. And that unworthiness, we all have it. And that unworthiness eventually really starts to, it starts to become less of a bubble that pops up. And it's powerful. Yeah, it's powerful to lean into that vulnerability.
I'm really glad you touched on this subject. That's one of those things where you hear about the term vulnerability, and there's a lot of people are out there talking about it, and you see, these quotes that get, branded about on social media, and everybody goes, oh, that's, wonderful. And then all of a sudden everybody just kind of goes right past that. Same thing with self-love, same thing with any of these other spiritual terms that people hear about. What I really want everybody listening to this podcast and watching this video to understand about what Katrina is talking about, this is deep level, authentic work. This means that for those of us who are the conscious-minded, heart-centered leaders, it's no longer about showing up and looking great and sounding perfect all the time. I mean, look, we want to show up as our best version of ourselves in the moment, right? So there's nothing wrong with being flawless. We're not talking about, just flailing and any of that stuff. We're talking about showing up, being the best version of yourself, but also the authenticity of it, which is if you're working through some shit and you happen to have a webinar, you happen to, be a guest on a podcast, or you're doing a workshop, bring some of that into the conversation. And if you're working with somebody, someone to help you through that, which I would like to think that as a leader, you're going to need to have some people on your side that you can go to, coaches, mentors. Be willing to open up. And I can speak from personal experience. There was many, many years where I didn't do that, where I bought into my own press clippings, where literally during a point where I was speaking all over the world, I was absolutely miserable, clinically diagnosed as being depressed, 160 plus pounds, almost overweight. And, here I am trying to mask it all, and pretend like that's not what I'm feeling. Like that's insane. And it caught up to me. So when I started getting real with my own inner self, that opened me up to a whole new world and allowed the space for my authentic self to be heard, to come into play within my physical reality. And that's where my message really, blossomed. And I know that's what you're doing as well. So if you can, talk just a little bit about your journey up to this point, because clearly you are one of the foremost leaders right now out there talking about these issues and these topics in a way that is both very relatable, right? So and it's real. And I love that about you. I love how you bring the authenticity and the realism into it. So for people who haven't been aware of your journey, talk a little bit about some of the things that you needed to work through to get to this point where you can stand in your light, in your truth, and speak it with such passion and vulnerability and really enjoy what you're doing. Because I know it wasn't easy to get here.
Oh my goodness, Peter. It was not easy, but I am so grateful. I have so much, now that I'm in this space, yes, it's easy to say, oh, that, right? But the thing about it is there is so much that's available to us if we just lean into community. So I had a lot of abuse as a child within community. So I grew up in an apocalyptic end times cult, like the world's going to end tomorrow. And so those messages were ingrained at a very young age. It was also oppression of women. So voices were suppressed. shame, guilt around sexuality, anything, you know, that you can really create in a cubicle of fear and intense lack of self-worth. Like those were the common threads. So that was my childhood. So once I graduated, I went to, you know, college. I was like, okay, I'm free. Like I can just walk away from that. Oh, that is actually when it started. So the real work started of trusting, of understanding, knowing, and then like I retreated. So I retreated from community because I was abused in community. So I retreated. And then as my journey has unfolded, the thing that was one of the scariest things was to actually really go into my heart and to not be like, I was stuck for 10 years writing my memoir. I was alone. I was like miserable. I had all these health issues. I had to have hip surgery. I thought I was chronically, you know, all these different ailments started festering. So I know what it's like to go, am I going to be able to function again as a human? I know what it's like to be in those spaces of despair. And it was because I didn't trust community. I didn't trust myself, and I didn't trust energy. So those things really unraveled in the last 2 years when I allowed so much more in my life. And this space now, today, where I'm actually working on like singing and showing up and trusting my intuition so deeply that I'm like all these different opportunities, collaborations, working with incredible individuals and leaders who are showing up. That is the space that I am so committed to, and I am so honored to be in this space because it is authentically from my heart. I've allowed that flame in my heart to connect with the highest place of source energy, and it has profoundly changed my life.
That's incredible. Thank you, first of all, for just sharing some of that with us. And, you know, when you were talking about just your upbringing as a child, I know that, you know, a lot of people might not be able to relate exactly to that, but I will say what everybody can relate to, and that is we were all, and I say all of us because there is no exceptions here, we were born into a world where limitations were placed on us before we even knew what we're capable of doing. So, you know, when you are born into an environment that has extreme levels of suppression, both from gender, in terms of, you know, what women and men are expected to do, how you're expected to behave. And then you've got the whole context of sexuality being literally stripped out from underneath you. And maybe you're, you know, as a person who's listening to this, maybe you've been abused sexually, maybe you've been abused verbally or physically. We've all experienced some level of abuse. And what's interesting about what you said, though, Katrina, and I'm really glad you pointed this out, is as you beautifully moved out of that environment and began to find a sense of empowerment within yourself, you go to college, you start finding a sense of purpose, and that's when the shit really hits the fan, so to speak. And see, this is where people get thrown out of whack, I think, on the spiritual journey and building a business, is that you can come out of a place of major transition, feel empowered, feel as if you finally found your voice, and you have, because at that point, you know, you're probably expressing yourself much more openly than you ever have. The thing is, though, there's a lot of hidden, unconscious programs and conditioning, deep-seated conditioning. This is where shadow work comes into play. And, you know, one of my upcoming guests, Janine Hassel, and I are talking about the shadow work, and we're going deep into that, what that actually is. And that's a lot of what Katrina's addressing here. Is there are things that come up to the surface. If you haven't dealt with it, in some cases, you wouldn't even have known how to deal with it because you weren't even aware it was there. And this is where community comes in. It is so important to understand that the only person that can give you permission to unleash your inspired voice and to go out there and share your message is you. That's it, only you. However, you cannot do that alone. Impossible. And you're going to need not just a community, but you're going to need a community who's genuinely able to step in, support you, provide you the guidance and to inspire you in the moments that matter most. So let's talk a little bit about that in terms of what community actually represents for you, Katrina. You've talked about it so far, but I want to just go a little bit deeper into that as it relates to kind of being vulnerable and sharing with other leaders and what comes of that. So you've experienced it firsthand. I have as well. And you and I have been, very supportive of one another in the past year. And so let's talk a little bit about what that looks like when somebody says yes to showing up and they say yes to their inspired message, but there's still that trepidation and that level of trust to be able to allow other people to come in and provide that support in the areas and really in the moments that it really matters.
Yes, this is such important. Like, I feel really tender about this, actually. Like, speaking, about this right now, it touches my heart in such a deep way, because that is the work. That is the space. That is where the growth happens in the deepest levels. Those are the spaces that I have so much compassion for in my clients when they show up and they're struggling, with various things, because I see that reflected in me. And the thing about community is we are able to reflect things to each other in such powerful ways. And for instance, with Peter, just even in conversations with him, when I am stuck, when I felt like, okay, there was just a little snarl, a little snag, and it was like this clarity came through, and it just opened up this whole new level of understanding the depth of my heart and the depth of what's available. So offering the space of deep transformation comes with this sense of security and feeling safe within that community. And it's really provided by allowing the heart to be fully present in those spaces. And a lot of times we can go into our heads. I've seen that so many times. There's control. There's all these other factors. Those I'm so aware of that I notice. And so I really keep those at bay within the people that I work with in the community. So even though I have a really soft heart, I'm very firm and very assertive, because the growth happens when you have those structures in place. And that's really the masculine and feminine. So that masculine support shows up and it is strong and you can lean into it. And it allows those the flow, that vulnerability of tears, of joy, of dance, of expression, whatever. That support allows so much of that flow. And that's what nourishes us the deepest, is when we allow the flow, the tears, the dance, the celebration, for everything, for the pain, for the journey, whatever it is. So I kind of wandered a little, because that just really touched my heart. And I felt that deeply, because that space of that depth, I hold so sacred.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm really glad that we had an opportunity to talk about this, because one thing I want to wrap up our interview with is about community and sort of tying all of this together. So we've talked about vulnerability. We've talked about the necessary support to help through really challenging situations, and particularly as Kundalini rises within our own body and what that represents, because it's bringing out the shadows, it's bringing out the unconscious conditioning and programs, and it's clearing out unworthiness. And that is an exhilarating, liberating experience. But at the same time, it's scary, and it's challenging our point of view on who we are, and it's challenging us to change our perspective of the world. And herein lies again the transition that we have already entered into in terms of our world and that of entrepreneurism and community. We're no longer operating from this place where to create business partnerships, it all has to make sense financially. Yes, on a financial level, when you're creating community and partnerships, that's important. The kind of community we're talking about is where there isn't this competition, there isn't this infighting, commiserating, backstabbing, and that doesn't just take place in the patriarchy and the old school paradigm of business. That crazy shit takes place in spiritual communities. And I just got to say right here openly, that crazy shit has to come to an end. We cannot build true unity consciousness without genuine, deep level support. And that comes with literally, we can't tolerate this idea of backstabbing and commiserating and really trying to do one-upmanship on one another. If you are a mentor or a mentee, your teacher, is guiding you, right? And you begin to rise even in terms of a level of success beyond the person who's coaching you. If you're a coach and you're a leader, you need to support your clients and support your community, even if they surpass you in terms of success. Because as one of us rises, we all rise. And that's what this is all about. Ram Dass said it best. We're all just walking each other home. So with that in mind, I want to say, Katrina, first and foremost, it is an honor to lock arms with you and so many other conscious and heart-centered leaders as we walk this path and as we share our inspired message. And so for people who have been inspired by the things you've talked about on this interview, where can they find more information about you? Where can they extend this conversation with you?
Yeah, such a great question. And we do all rise together. That's exactly, I just had the image of the Kundalini rising. So beautiful. Yes, so you can contact me on my website. I have all sorts of information on there, ways to connect with my podcast, The Elemental Lifestyle with Katrina, that's available on iTunes shortly. And all of my programs and my private sessions, they are all available. Like all the information, you can go to my website, katrinaelkins.com, or you can go to Facebook. You can find me there. I am so excited about what has unraveled in my life to offer these places and this support of true authenticity and leadership from the heart. And when I see my clients growing at exponential rates, I could not be more excited for them, because there is no control. There is this space of illumination that allows this amplification of our world. And there is nothing sweeter than seeing people show up fully in their brightest, most vibrant life. It's so juicy and alive, and like it is the most potent thing that we have here.
It absolutely is. I love that, and I'm so glad that you said that here as we come to a conclusion of the interview. Again, for people who want to extend this conversation, go to katrinaelkins.com. And as I said at the beginning of the interview, one of the things that makes this podcast unique is that a lot of our guests are extending this conversation, not just to, obviously, to their platforms and websites, but we're doing these bonus videos. And in some cases, we have downloadable documents and PDFs and worksheets where people can actually take some of the material and the topics and go even deeper with that journey. And so in this particular case, Katrina and I have a bonus video that is going to be talking about the divine feminine and divine masculine energies. Now, where do you get this? You can go to peterclarknelson.com. There is a form on that website, both in the section for the podcast and also on the homepage, where you fill out that form, and then you'll be redirected to the bonus page, where you'll not only be able to find the bonus video for Katrina and myself, but also a lot of other bonus materials from other guests. And as this podcast is going to grow, we are just getting started. So there's going to be continuously added material there. So no matter where you're coming across this podcast or video, when you sign up, you can always go back to that bonus page and continue to get additional material from the guests. And again, Katrina, I just want to say what an honor and how exciting it has been to have you on to talk about these subjects that really until this time frame of, where we are with humanity's ascension and expansion, these are subjects that most people didn't have readily available access to. And particularly, as we said at the beginning of the show, this was material that you had to go into a particular area to get it, and it was separate from anything relating to business. And if there's anything that people got out of this interview with Katrina, it's that the energies that we're talking about here, everything is energy, and energy is everything, right? So if you look at the feminine and masculine energies, when we harmonize those and we bring those together and we speak from a place of vulnerability, this is where we start to find true, authentic success and fulfillment. And that is really the age we're living in today of conscious leaders speaking from their heart, utilizing the strategic aspects and structure of the mind, but that they're following their heart and they're creating a path that everyone else can be a part of. And that's where the community starts to not only really grow, but we start to expand in ways that we couldn't even imagine before. So I want to thank everybody for joining us on this version of the Unleash Your Inspired Voice podcast. And I look forward to having you join us on the next episode. Katrina, thank you again. And everyone, have a beautiful and wonderful day. To learn more about Katrina Elkins, be sure to visit katrinaelkins.com. You can also follow her on social media at facebook.com/Katrina Elkins and Instagram.com/Katrina_Elkins. As you just heard at the end of the interview, Katrina is going to join me for a heart-expansive discussion on the divine feminine and divine masculine energies. Now, if you're not sure what these sacred energies are, or you've wondered what they have to do with scaling a successful business, you do not want to miss this bonus video and audio recording. To download the bonus video and MP3 recording, go to peterclarknelson.com or unleashyourinspiredvoice.com and sign up for the bonus material. You will gain access to the bonus material from Katrina, and you will also continue to receive access to all bonus materials from many of our show's upcoming guests. Again, thank you for joining us on Unleash Your Inspired Voice.